thrilled to be welcoming members of that team. Chris Metropolis is in the room with us today. Welcome, Chris. And also, we've got the broader EcoSchools family in the room today too, and very happy to welcome one of our presenters, Lindsay Bunce. I am very sad to report that Jenn Vetter is not, because of illness, able to join us this afternoon, but we have some slides. I think they're going to fill in the gap. I've been working with the EcoSchools team for a number of years and have been very honored to learn their story along the way. So I'm going to fill in some of Jenn's role, and then Lindsay's going to pick up on the broader EcoSchools Ontario and Canada piece. I noticed that we've got Catherine Mahler in the room, who is actually one of the originators and founders of this program. So I'm hoping we can draw on Catherine as well to help share some of the history of that as we go. So welcome to everybody for this webinar today. We will be recording the session so we can share it with others moving forward. So with this, I'm going to start with a land acknowledgement. We have been doing artistic land acknowledgements to begin these webinars each week, and we're really happy to do another one today. I'd like to introduce you to the work of Merle Mcmaster. Merle is an amazing artist, a young artist, I can say, she is a Canadian Indigenous artist, and she comes from a Plains Cree, British and Dutch ancestry, and she lives currently in the city of Ottawa. Her work is predominantly photography based. She incorporates the production of props, sculptural garments, and performance that all explores the self in relationship to land, lineage, history, culture, and the more than human world. This particular piece is called Time's Gravity, and I saw it originally at the Art Gallery of Ontario on display a couple of years ago. It's a really neat piece. She's holding a library of journals that reach out to be the length of her arms, and they have red placeholders hanging from them that are kind of like the fringes of a Cree dress. She says that the journals remind her of where she comes from. Each one on the spine of the journal has a drawing that represents an important life event for that particular year. These are inspired by winter count drawings that were used by Indigenous people on Turtle Island to create a pictorial calendar for a community's oral history. So we're very grateful to Merle for viewing her work today as part of our land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge that we're hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. And we're also like to recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. And this is the land acknowledgement from the Toronto District School Board. So with that in mind, I would like to introduce you to really the main presenter. I'm sort of the fill-in today, but Lindsay Bunce is the executive director of what is now EcoSchools Canada. Lindsay and I are going to sort of tag team on this presentation to some degree. Lindsay, I invite your participation at any point, please, when I'm talking about the TDSB's EcoSchools program. The same with Chris and the same with Catherine. We'd love to hear from any of you as we go through. I know that we've got some very experienced EcoSchools teachers in the room. Rebecca's here today, as is Hong Liang. I really encourage you to share some of your stories as we go along as well. All of those would be very much welcomed. So we are going to start with the story of the TDSB EcoSchools program to begin. And I know that this was begun back in approximately 2002. Catherine, you're welcome to correct me if I've got that date wrong. Lindsay and I were doing our best guess on it. And this was started up by Richard Christie and Eleanor Dudor at the Toronto District School Board, both of whom are just incredible educators and in many ways brought the green learning movement, not just to the TDSB, but to Canada, I think, in many ways. Certainly the Toronto District School Board has been one of the most active school boards when it comes to the EcoSchools program, sometimes called the Green Schools Movement. And so they've been really phenomenal that way. Catherine, I don't know if you're prepared to hop in or not, but we would love to hear just a short story about your early involvement in the EcoSchools program. Would you be okay to share that with us? I know I'm putting you on the spot, so I hope that you're okay with that.
No, that's okay. So hi everybody, my name is Catherine Mahler, and I started to do my teaching degree and at OISE, and Hillary was my professor for art, which was really great. I'm a junior intermediate teacher. And so I don't know what it's like now with the 2-year program, but back in the day, we could do an internship. So we had to do 2 placements. What do you call them? You know, when you co-teach. Anyways, And then the third one was an internship, and that was more flexible. So I asked if I could be with Richard's team, as like they were developing TDSB EcoSchools, and they had just started their relationship with the federal government to kind of create an Ontario version of it at the same time. But I actually started as an intern with Heidi Campbell doing the school ground greening guide. And so I've always really liked trees, and I heard Cam Collier from Evergreen talk about this unique partnership that had developed with Heidi being embedded in the TDSB as their school ground greening consultant, and they were doing some work on stuff. And I asked if I could be an intern, and they had never had an intern before, but they said yes. I kind of had to pester. Not that they were reluctant, they just didn't really know what to do with me at first. So we worked it out, and I started working as an intern, and then I got a part-time contract. That's enough for now. Okay. I'm sure your presentation.
But I love that there's an OISE TDSB connection even in the early days of this work, and that you're part of that story and that history. So thanks for sharing that. I love that you also started as an intern and now you're working at the Ministry of Education. So isn't that lovely? And I'm not sure if this is still current, but certainly you've been the environmental education officer there for many years. So
I still am.
There you go. So from humble beginnings, right? Working in the TDSB's EcoSchools program, you never know where you're going to land later in life. And
so my advice is to say yes to anything that you can. Yeah. Just say yes and try to make it happen.
So Catherine was part of the early team trying to figure out this work, and Richard and Eleanor are very central to that. Also doing a lot of lobbying at the ministry level, even in those early days, to see if we could get a policy in place to support environmental education. In fact, Catherine was involved in that early process as well, as part of an expert committee later on. As she became the executive director of Ontario EcoSchools. So everything's interconnected, right? This is systems thinking. Even from the early days, these things have all come together. Certainly, this is now what you're looking at on the screen is the 6 different components, of the EcoSchools program now. They didn't start this way. They started with waste minimization, energy conservation, really as the core. And one of the ways they were able to sell that to the board was on the promise of financial savings that would be accrued from these 2 areas. But it has grown to this really rich and vibrant system at this point in time that now spans ecological literacy, leadership development, vibrant school grounds, as Catherine just made mention. The vibrant school grounds piece has been part of it early on, though it wasn't really seen as integral part of the program, but they wove that in those early years, and then into healthy communities, thinking about sustainable transportation, for example, as part of that. So there's really a very rich basis now for the TDSB EcoSchools program. They thought of this system that came from Europe originally, of having a certification process to go alongside. They started with a very small number of schools. I think it was something like 8 or 9 schools in the early years, but the program very, very quickly grew. And I've just noticed that we have Pam Miller who has joined us in the room. Pam is well placed to talk about this. And in fact, I don't know if she wants to hop in. She's actually the EcoSchools instructional leader who has been seconded to virtual school. And Pam, we are very happy to have you in the room today. Jen is unfortunately had to bow out because she's ill. But if you're able to hop in and pick up on the history, you can speak to this far better than I can.
Well, and I just actually was signaling to us 15 schools in the southeast corner of Toronto, and it just seems to be the strong area. And I'm thinking Rebecca, who's also in the room, was maybe part of that early group of champions.
So, and you're absolutely right, Pam. We're developing school leadership, both from the student perspective and from teachers' perspectives, was always part of I think, the ideal from those early days. And now it's a fundamental part of the program at the TDSB, which is great. This notion that we should be developing through the development of eco-schools, sometimes they're called eco-clubs or eco-teams, which has been a really important part of it, there's now clear development pieces in part with middle school and secondary school conferences. And the EcoSchool kickoffs that Pam has been leading along with Jenn in recent years have been a huge success in terms of bringing teachers and students together and really thinking through their planning mechanisms each year for what they're going to do as an eco school. We also wanted to flag, though, that the EcoSchools movement has really grown since its original inception at the TDSB. And I think this is one of the things that makes it really unique. They now have a sustainability office at the TDSB. Pam has been part of that for many years. It's now headed up by Richard Christie, who's the senior manager. And Pam, I don't know if you want to talk through these next couple of slides. I just wanted to spend a few minutes talking about some of the ways that EcoSchools has grown beyond its original series of activities into some things that are really well, I think they're really interesting, but maybe that's because I think EcoSchools is really interesting. So this notion of trying to bring about systemic change, I'll pick up on some of these slides and maybe you can just talk to them if that's all right with you for a few minutes.
Yeah. Sure. Well, and Mary, too, who is also one of the early amazing people that went around to schools and championed it as the specialist role. I think, we always give credit to Richard because in terms of thinking both for the opportunity to work with one of the facilities folks and remind Sheila, I was just trying to think, she was an architect. But anyway, just kind of looking at what would be that one thing, that 20% thing that would change, it would be a game changer. And so he often looks for crises, and the first crisis was the cost of oil going up, the cost of energy going up. And then being able to sell the program as something that would actually change behaviors and save the board money was a huge opportunity and crisis at the same time. And so exactly, we see that even the solar campaign, fixing the roofs because they needed fixing, was another opportunity to bring in AMP Solar to make that happen. And so
I've got a couple slides about the solar coming up if you want to speak to that then.
Yeah. And yeah, as you're going through these slides, again, thinking about what we could change, and even things like the bulk bins not being picked up every day was a huge money saver. So a lot of it was sold to the board as we can change the facilities practices and give you more money back into the coffers. And unfortunately, up until this year, the facilities piece has been really hard to convince if we didn't have money behind it. You don't have some altruistic people in facilities going, yay, yay, environment. It's more about the money. So I think Richard really capitalized on that in terms of diverting all the, making the programs happen through getting the money back into the system.
There's lots of different ways that the TDSB is contributing to healthy communities too, whether that's through school ground greening, or whether that's through sustainable transportation, like their cycling education program. They've had an amazing large tree planting program that they do in combination with the City of Toronto, which has really helped to replant trees, which some of whom are aging out and some have been taken down by the emerald ash borer in recent years. So there's been an amazing partnership. And we know that trees are now a great way to really act as carbon sinks. So there's another whole layer of benefits that come with that. This is one of my favorite ones, Pam. Do you want to speak to this just briefly?
Sure. And again, this would be Richard's and Justin Nadeau's brainstorm, where how do you take an advantage of a really horrible situation? And he created a whole policy about how to repurpose the trees. And so, yes, it's so great to see. And I think some of the work that the students did, making these beautiful tables and chairs and shelving units, etc. And if you go to Civic, you still see remnants of the sawmill that's there, because there would be a glut of people not having real work during, I think it was sort of January to March. And so you had free labor. And so we just put in a portable sawmill so that we could take advantage of the ash and then make them into usable products. So it's part of a strategic move on Richard called the Urban Forest Management Plan.
I wonder if the TDSB would count as being the only school board that's had a portable sawmill in one of their parking lots and in full use. Years. Certainly designing outdoor spaces. I know that Han Liang, who's with us in the room today as an experienced ECE with the TDSB, has been taking full advantage of some of these outdoor spaces with her kindergarten classes, and to wonderful effect. She's reported in previous webinars about some of her work, and she's just done a fantastic job about getting her kindergarten students outside and doing nature-based loose parts play as part of that as well. And certainly the TDSB EcoSchools team has done a wonderful job trying to get bike racks and project the water bottle refilling stations into schools too.
I just want to actually jump in on your last slide. I was actually just at an outdoor ed meeting, which is why I'm a little bit late for this. But the fact that the trustees saw the good that Opal was doing, and unfortunately, as we know, the formal Opal has stopped, but Linda Nacarado has really infused a culture of how to have kids play outside. And so now the trustees have put down a motion that the outdoor ed department will support both secondary and elementary instructional time with outdoor learning. And so that's coming down the pipe for next year. And so I was just, as I said, with the outdoor ed staff as they are revisioning how they can support schools at schools.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Pam. So there's been so much that has come that's really quite impressive and astounding, including energy projects, geothermal installations in new school setups in some cases. Pam made mention of the solar energy. There's now 301 TDSB schools with solar panels on the roof, which is absolutely incredible. And that has got a financial payback to the board, which up until very, very recently, in fact, was only turned and used into other sustainability projects for the board as well through the Environmental Legacy Fund. And when they do develop new buildings in the TDSB now, they are really thinking very carefully about how they make them into high performance green buildings, which is really a fantastic development and hopefully should be taken on by all school boards moving forward as well. This is a great way to really make schools community hubs for sustainability and climate action. Certainly the professional learning piece is part of the work that the TDSB has been doing, and they've been doing it on a broad scale, and that's how the partnership with OISE has come into place to support that. Just want to put in a quick plug about this, that if you're looking for an AQ course for this summer, we are running them again. They'll actually be running part 1 in spring, environmental education part 1, and in spring and summer for part 1 and part 2. And the TDSB is the only school board that I know that gives a subsidy actually for environmental education professional learning. So that's pretty impressive. So with all of that in mind, I am going to stop that share and I'm going to reintroduce our second speaker for today, because Lindsay's going to pick up the story of how the TDSB now has taken the work that they've done and really managed to extend that provincially, and now the most exciting part, nationally. And that's really taking the local, hopefully national, well, absolutely national, and then eventually really connecting to the global movement of green schools as well.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Hillary. Can everyone see my screen? Yes. So hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. As Hillary mentioned, my name is Lindsay, and I am the Executive Director of EcoSchools Canada, formerly Ontario EcoSchools, as Catherine mentioned earlier. I've been working in the outdoor and environmental sector or education sector for about the past 20 years. And my experience with EcoSchools comes from a variety of perspectives. So when EcoSchools transitioned from a TDSB program to an Ontario-based program, I was among one of the first schools to certify. So I was working at an outdoor ed center with the TRCA, and we had brought together a team of students and learned about this new cool program called EcoSchools that we could be participating in, and we could leverage a framework to really have transformational change across our site. So I bring that perspective. And then through my work with TRCA, I've also worked as a school board representative. So working on systems change across Peel region, working very closely with the Dufferin Peel Catholic and Peel District school boards to really sort of kickstart their EcoSchools journey from that perspective. And I've also sat on the advisory committee for EcoSchools when it was Ontario EcoSchools leading up to my employment here. So now I'm a staff member and really excited to be bringing EcoSchools along for this journey from provincial programming to now national programs.
And I have to say, I'm really envious of your avatar there. It looks just like you.
Oh yeah, so this is the fun thing about having a graphic designer. We have staff avatars for the entire team. It's pretty fun, and we're all doing our favorite activities. So that's me hiking in Northern Ontario. So we are a national charity. So we were incubated at York University for many years, and then recently became a national charity just to be able to serve Canada in a different way and make the program available nationally from coast to coast to coast. We are the longest standing and largest environmental certification program for K-12 schools in Canada. And our bilingual training tools and resources are currently offered for free to publicly funded schools. So there is a small fee that we charge to private and independent schools just to cover some of that in-kind capacity that we get from working closely with school boards and districts. We work with schools in school communities in 5 buckets or 5 different ways. So one is really building environmental leadership and capacity for students, staff, and school communities. And Hillary did a great job of showing some really fantastic examples within the TDSB of how that sort of manifests itself on the ground. We work to improve the operational efficiency of school buildings, and we know through third-party studies that certified platinum eco-schools produce 57% less waste than non-certified schools. And as you saw in Hillary's slides, there is a statistically significant savings around energy consumption and energy intensity within schools. So there is a reduction in greenhouse gases. We work to connect schools to local resources through a strong network of national and regional partners. So making sure that schools have access to high quality resources and really get that support and scaffolding that they need as they're starting to think about, innovating and inviting conversations around these really important environmental projects at the school level. We are a certification program, so really we leverage our certification framework to recognize excellence through robust reporting, assessment, and now a collective impact framework across Canada. And our work right now, and this has been a slight sort of, not necessarily a shift in sort of the spirit of EcoSchools, but more explicitly now we're thinking about how we connect to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And as we're introducing new actions into the framework and talking to schools about the actions that they're taking, really trying to underscore that connection to broader national and global initiatives. So certification happens in sort of a 5-step process, and many of you are familiar with the program, so I don't necessarily need to go through all these steps, but really wanting to underscore the fact that we're trying to put agency into the hands of students so that they are in control of environmental action plans at their school. They have a personal connection to what they're taking on, they can see those tangible results, and then that inspires them to engage and activate their broader community. A big piece of our program that's common across all of the EcoSchools programs and how boards and districts interact with the program is this reflection and celebration piece. So we are high-fiving all the time as a team, really wanting to highlight those fantastic accomplishments that are happening at both the school board and district level, but also at schools on the ground. And so, how do we really use that positive language and that celebratory sort of motivation to keep the program going and encourage schools to make their program bigger and better year over year? And we know from our a long time doing this that schools, once they have a few years of certification under their belt, it really does start to become part of the school's identity. And so they really work hard to either maintain or improve their certification level. And not last year, because last year was a bit odd due to COVID, but in our previous year, we noted that 34% of our schools increased their certification level. So that meant that they were either taking on more actions or they were deepening the program and deepening the actions that they were taking. Everything that we do rests on 3 core values. So one is really about inclusivity, diversity, and openness, really supporting inclusive eco teams that create a strong sense of belonging for students. And anecdotally, and I'm sure this is the case in TDSB as well, we find that the eco team is often a home for students that may not find themselves a home in other places in the school. So maybe they're not, really inclined to take on sports or take on a different activity in the school, because EcoSchools rests on this belief that we all have a role to play in our sustainability journey. It really can be a welcoming home for students where they can come in and really intuitively see how they can connect and have an impact. As a certification body, it's really important for us to be open and accountable. So striving to be fair, truthful, and transparent with our certification program, but also bringing an open mind and supporting different forms of innovation that are coming from school communities as we're facing these complex environmental issues. And finally, focusing on being action-oriented. So really fostering an environment of critical thinking, looking at systems thinking, and really working with our community to find solutions to all of these problems. So we've talked a lot about our history today, and I'll just give you an overview. And then I was hoping to spend the kind of majority of our time together, or my time speaking to you about the process that we went through as we were launching the national program, because it was a very intentional and slow process. It happened over the course of 3.5 to 4 years. And at every step of the way, we were working hand in hand with the TDSB. In fact, OISE was involved in some of our early consultations about the new program as well. So really thinking about this partnership and how can we leverage our collective strength to make the program better as it steps onto a national stage. So as you know, Ontario EcoSchools was established based on, a gift of it was a gift of intellectual property from the TDSB. So TDSB recognized that they had a fantastic program on their hands, and other school boards under the leadership of Catherine Muller were coming together to explore what provincial program delivery might look like. So in 2005, so shortly after TDSB launched their board-wide program, a core group of TRCA and a variety of school boards in and around the GTA came together, and Ontario EcoSchools was born. This year, in 2020-21, is when we launched our national rollout. And as I mentioned, we spent about 3 or 4 years getting ready for this national rollout. So that included also creating a national pilot that ran last year with schools in Ontario, in New Brunswick, and Alberta. So just to get a sense of how a national program would land, and making sure that we were getting things right as we were thinking about what a more universal and globally relevant framework would look like. So currently, I'm happy to share that we have participating schools in 8 provinces and territories, including the most northern school board in the Northwest Territories. And as you can imagine, launching a national program in the midst of COVID was very scary, and really required us to kind of think on our feet and be very ready, sort of in a learning posture, to understand how things were going to be received by schools across Canada. But we're very, very excited about the response, and really looking ahead to next September as an opportunity to show Canada what we can do, hopefully if COVID restrictions are loosened or lessened. So going national, the decision for us to go national came as a result of a variety of factors. So one was really leveraging a strong community of EcoSchools in Ontario and a tested program. So the program had existed for 14 years in Ontario, and we knew that it was working. We had the sustainability metrics to back up what we were doing. And so we really knew that we had a really strong product as we were stepping out onto a national stage. We were also responding to many out of province requests from schools and school districts on why did we not have an EcoSchools Canada program, and why were we keeping this amazing program just in Ontario? Going national also enabled us to fundraise and engage with our partners in a much broader way. So just stepping out of that provincial stage and onto a national one really allowed us to diversify our funding and strengthen our organizational development, but also enabled us to create partnerships with national partners like WWF and others, where they really wanted to focus on reaching a national audience. And it also enabled us to include and highlight diverse perspectives across Canada. So we had done a really great job through our partnerships in understanding the landscape across Ontario, but really needed to better understand what was happening across the country. And this gave us an opportunity to learn more on how to highlight those diverse perspectives and then bake them into the certification framework itself. So a bit about where we were coming from in Ontario. So in Ontario, we have about 50,000 student leaders. So those are, Hillary mentioned eco teams or eco clubs. They're also called eco dragons and eco ninjas, depending on where you are. And so about 50,000 students a year, put up their hand and choose to support their school as on the eco team. And those students are housed in about 2,000 certified schools. Through their engagement and activation of their broader school community, through projects and campaigns and different ways of communicating across the broader school community, we were able to reach 1 million students last year. We work regularly with 80 community partners, and so that can be community delivery organizations, school boards or districts, really anyone who wants to partner with us. We're really happy to have a conversation, but really wanting to look at partners that supported a school's journey in achieving their certification goals. And in spite of the barriers presented by COVID, we are still hoping to reach 2 million students across Canada by 2022.
Lindsay, can you, there was a question from Han Liang in the—
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Just asking about how the program might look different in schools in northern areas and whether that runs in similar ways to the TDSB or whether that would be very different.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so we'll have to see, because this is our first certification year. So we are doing a little bit of a stronger touch in terms of engaging with our northern schools so we can better understand their experience. And we do run a certification survey every June, and we'll be providing coaching visits throughout the spring with those schools. So I think that is our opportunity to really listen and learn from those schools on how best to, in future continue modifying the program. Right now, because it is a certification program, I think TDSB also sort of looks at it this way as well. We talk about the what, but not necessarily the how. So we talk about the framework and the benchmarks and the certification criteria, but schools really get to determine how they bring it to life on the ground. And so that offers a tremendous amount of flexibility for schools to determine sort of what is locally relevant for them and how can they, massage what they're doing or amplify what they're doing to then fulfill and meet the certification criteria. We're also working on something really exciting that's coming out next September called Regional User Experiences. And so it means that when a school logs on to our certification platform, they may have a slightly different experience depending on where they are in Canada. So that allows us to better connect to local curriculum expectations, to local Indigenous treaty groups. It now allows us to connect schools more explicitly to community partners that are working in their region. And we can also tweak some of those actions to then better respond to what is happening on the ground. So an example that we like to share is, and I'll show you this actually later in the presentation, but one of our core themes is marine and coast. And so it doesn't really make sense for schools in Saskatchewan to have marine and coast actions at the beginning of their environmental action plan or be presented with those opportunities at the onset of being an eco school. But it does make sense for many other provinces and territories to have marine and coast actions front and center in their plan. And so by developing these regional user experiences, it allows us to slightly tailor the experience to then better reflect what a school's experience might look like. So I hope that answers.
One of the real advantages of moving to an online platform, now a complete online platform for this.
Oh, you bet. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So before we launched the national program, we brought together a variety of stakeholders ranging from students to educators, parents, trustees, government. Hillary was there, Pam was involved. Catherine, I believe, weighed in at different times of the process just to make sure that we were accounting for all perspectives and really listening to our community. And they came back loud and clear with a few things that we considered as we started thinking about a national program. So they found that our current eligibility for different certification levels was a bit confusing. So we worked on streamlining that. they noticed that in some of the sections of certification, there was potentially overlapping content. And so how could we create a certification framework that is more flexible and more dynamic? So where we can add actions, we can add certification opportunities without having to sort of reimagine the whole framework itself. So how do we build that sort of dynamic nature into the certification program? There's a large emphasis on data collection. So students wanted access to their data, and we know through a variety of pedagogical theory that having access to your own data and seeing how you can improve and having those clear steps on how to do better in the actions that you're taking really can be a strong motivator for change. Schools felt that they really liked the school visits, but scheduling and assessment were a bit challenging. And so we worked on streamlining that process. And again, with the inflexible structure, that really goes back into that data collection and limited sections. So really wanting a more flexible certification structure where schools had a little bit more autonomy and flexibility over their certification program. And then one thing that, the TDSB and we have connected on a lot is this idea of certification fatigue. So we have schools now, they're in their 15th year of certification. And so how do we recognize those schools? How do we continue to motivate them and encourage them to continue on with their certification journeys?
And I can see Rebecca smiling as part of that. As an experienced EcoSchools teacher, she could probably speak to that notion.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And as we started thinking about our national footprint, we actually worked very closely with a scaling consultant. And he encouraged us through many discussions with a variety of our stakeholders to leverage a social franchise model. So we had a very strong foothold in Ontario. As I mentioned, we had a variety of partners working on the program and supporting our growth, but really not much of a footprint outside of Ontario. So we spent 3 years developing national partnerships and managing relationships across Canada. And we selected partners that were already delivering high quality environmental and sustainability education programming in their regions, and those that maintained really strong relationships with regional school boards and districts. So we didn't want to start from scratch as we were moving nationally. We wanted to really pick up on the fantastic work that was already happening on the ground and ask ourselves, how can we bring value to their programming that already exists? We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We don't want to be competitive in this space. We want to elevate everyone's program together and really contribute to those communities. And so we spent a really long time thinking carefully about who our partners were and introducing ourselves in a variety of different ways to really establish those strong relationships. And that has led ultimately to the formation of a national advisory committee of key stakeholders across the country that are helping to guide program delivery. And two of our key partnerships, so we did spend a lot of time working in Alberta and New Brunswick, and they've been really fantastic opportunities to look at the program in different ways. So working closely with ACE, the Alberta Council for Environmental Education, we've been able to connect to municipal climate action goals. So one of their main motivators was really activating schools in the Calgary region, along with the city of Calgary, to tackle municipal climate action goals and connect schools to that work that's happening at the municipal level. So that's been a lot of our focus working with ACE. On the other side of the country in New Brunswick, the Gaia project was really interested in trying to figure out how to elevate climate education, working in close partnership with the Ministry of Education in the province of New Brunswick. So their framing was a little bit different. They were really focused more on those education pieces, where ACE was focused more on those sustainability pieces. And so we wanted to figure out, how can we create a certification framework that can serve everyone, that can really sort of capture all of that data and really, again, bring value to the programming that's already happening. So working in partnership with the National Advisory Committee, we developed some key sustainability drivers. So as you can imagine, there won't be any surprises on this list. So, building capacity and agency and awareness among youth. We looked at energy use, biodiversity, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, looking at waste, water, operational efficiency. But the big one for us was tracking collective impact. So we worked with the National Advisory Committee to come up with common metrics across Canada. So if we wanted to talk about the impact of the program, what are some of those key metrics that we could use that would be globally relevant, or at least nationally relevant? And we could all start talking the same language around EcoSchools and the impact of the program. So that really informed our development as we were moving into the national framework. We were also guided by some key education drivers. And again, no big surprises here in terms of really developing leadership skills, focusing on community connected learning and project-based learning. Because the online platform is accessible to students, it does support digital literacy and the building of global competencies. We wanted to connect to a broad range of curriculum expectations. And as I mentioned before, sort of anchoring the program in global and national initiatives. So another step we took as we were getting ready for national launch is we joined FEE. And FEE is the Foundation for Environmental Education, and they oversee the EcoSchools programs that are delivered nationally around the world. So in order to become a member of FEE, you need to deliver 2 of the 5 FEE programs. So they are as follows: EcoSchools, Young Reporters for the Environment, Learning About Forests, Green Key, which is a hotel certification, and Blue Flag, which you might be familiar with. You often on Toronto beaches, you'll see the blue flag, and that's an indication that the water is safe for swimming. So we took EcoSchools and the Young Reporters for the Environment program as our 2 sort of keystone projects as we became members of FEE. Since then, Swim, Drink, Fish, which is an organization based in Toronto that works on water issues, which you may be aware of, has decided to take on Blue Flag as well. So now we're starting to create this community of FEE program delivery groups in Canada, and being able to, again, start these international global conversations about the work that we're doing here. The FEE network is big. So you may or may not know that EcoSchools is delivered in 70 countries around the world in a national capacity. And actually, Canada was the last of the G7 countries to join the FEE network. So we were really excited to be able to bring Canada into the fold, not only to learn from other countries and what they were doing, but also to share the fantastic work that's already happening here on the ground. And I will say that we came into that network as leaders. We are collectively, everyone on this call, doing really, really fantastic work that is, making people pay attention internationally, and is really becoming some, the standard and some of the benchmarking against which some of these international programs are being measured. Across the FEE network, there are 19 million students that are reached through events and campaigns, projects, and initiatives. About 1.3 million teachers are supporting eco teams around the world, and just under 60,000 schools are in the EcoSchools network globally. So a lot of work happening. All of the countries that are participating in the FEE EcoSchools, or under the FEE EcoSchools umbrella, connect to 12 different themes. And they really largely mirror the SDGs with a few exceptions, but these are the 12 themes. And so if you are an EcoSchool that is part of our program that's navigating through the online platform, you'll see that every action we suggest connects to one or more of the FEE themes, because we do want to maintain that connectivity and that consistency across the global network. And finally, as we were thinking about the national program, we needed a new national platform. And so we spent a lot of time developing a new platform that sort of tries to marry e-learning experience with e-commerce experience, and really make it a user-friendly and fun place for students and teachers to collaborate on their environmental planning, to track their performance, and then to ultimately certify. We developed an API that connects to a platform called ArcSCORU. And ArcSCORU is what the US Green Building Council uses, the Canadian Green Building Council, the Center for Green Schools, to assess LEED certification readiness. So it is really used as a tool in the building sector to, articulate and better understand operational efficiency in schools, or in buildings rather. So we were able to sort of modify their capabilities and create impact reports for our school through the use of an API. And I'm not going to go through the platform today, because once I get started on talking about the platform, I can go on and on. But if you are interested in having a demo or learning more about the platform, please do reach out to our team, and we'd be happy to show you what it looks like, or you may already be a school that's using the platform. But ultimately, at the end of the day, what the platform becomes is this pretty powerful collective impact tool where we can start to see trends, gaps, and opportunities across Canada. So as more and more schools are on the platform, and as we're really articulating those sustainability metrics in a national frame, we can start to tell the same story of certification in the K-12 space across the country. So what are the conditions for success in a school in New Brunswick, and how do we cross-pollinate those conditions for success to a school in British Columbia? And how do we, make sure that there is connection between those regional groups that are delivering high quality programming, and how do we, leverage those resources to make sure that everyone across Canada has access to that important support? So here we are. This is our current national reach. So you'll see we're really proud of these two schools way up north. To be perfectly transparent, we have no idea how these schools found us, but we're so thrilled that they're part of the network and seeking certification this year. You can see that we still do have a very high intensity of schools in Ontario, but we are slowly making inroads across Canada. We've just formalized a partnership in Quebec that will bring approximately 350 schools from Quebec onto the platform next year. So we're really excited about this potential growth across Canada, and really encouraged by people seeing our vision of using the platform to not compete with, but to elevate the programming that's already happening across the country. And finally, just where are we headed with all of this? So we just formalized and finalized our strategic plan for the next 3 years, and it focuses on 3 priorities. So one is really looking at growing our network of EcoSchools across the country. So how do we build out tools and resources like the regional user experiences I explained earlier to really, invite schools to have a personal connection with the EcoSchools program and really see themselves in the program? How can we bring in a greater number of diverse voices and diverse perspectives into the platform and ensure that we are really telling the story of K-12 schools across the country? The second is to provide innovative tools and resources that support data-driven climate action. So, I've probably said data 67 times in this presentation, but that really is the core of what we do. So we see ourselves as being that data collection and analysis group or organization, because that's often a gap that delivery organizations on the ground have, where they don't have the capacity to really talk about the impact of their work because they're in schools doing really fantastic one-on-one engagement or classroom engagement. So we see ourselves stepping into that role and providing that service, not only for schools and school boards, but for municipalities, for government, and for community organizations. And finally, our third priority is to really strengthen our partnerships, our EcoSchools community, and our organization. And before I leave you, or before we move on to questions, I just wanted to identify. So if you're interested in, continuing to follow our journey, we, post a lot on social media. Our social channels are quite active as well. We have a fantastic website with a variety of information, tips and tricks, and a bit about our history and a little bit about the framework. But it is available, that our information that is available to you at your disposal. And then, I thought my slides were flipped. Anyway, I will thank our supporters before I move on to the next slide. So just want to recognize the supporters that have helped make the national program possible. And we're working with really fantastic partners, both regionally and nationally, to really help us achieve our shared sustainability goals. And finally, if you do have any questions or would like a demo of the platform, or want to learn more about our progression and our plans for future expansion across the country, please reach out to our programs team, and we'd be happy to set up a call or a demo for you at any time. Thanks so much.
Lindsay, I just find that a really exciting presentation. Thank you so much. It is astounding to see what has grown from, those little acorn seeds in the TDSB. Don't get me wrong, the acorns are growing very nicely, and the TDSB continue to grow on their own, but you folks are just going to spread those seeds all over the entire country. And it is so exciting to see the connections as well to the international fee movement. So it's looking like it's all coming together, which is amazing. And you've done the national rollout during a pandemic, which is even more impressive. I'm not sure how you folks even did that when you weren't working together. So thank you so much. I would like to just draw on Rebecca Kaheen, if I can, just for a minute. Rebecca is a very experienced EcoSchools teacher. And Rebecca, can you just, for just a couple of minutes, just talk, and again, thank you for letting me put you on the spot. Just talk a little bit about what it's meant to you and your students to be involved in the EcoSchools program over the years.
At two of the schools I worked at, we became Platinum EcoSchools, and it brings a sense of pride to the school community, and it becomes infused in our school improvement plan. I actually had a chance to pilot the new online platform last year at Port Royal, and Port Royal has been an EcoSchool in the past and had stopped applying for EcoSchool status because of all the work involved in terms of putting together a portfolio. In my experience, the online ability really brought kids in to creating the leadership opportunity for them to become more involved in the creation of the portfolio to apply for EcoSchools. So I found that was really helpful. At Port Royal, the online platform last year, I found when we were piloting, was awesome in terms of the resources that are available in teaching the kids how to use and to participate in some of the campaigns that EcoSchools Canada has resources for. I was hoping we could talk a little bit about how people are overcoming some of the COVID restrictions for some of the things that I typically would do in a school year, such as a waste audit. And like, we haven't really brought out our Opal play equipment here at Port Royal because of the inability to clean things between cohort groups and things like that. But it does, I find that EcoSchools does become part of the school culture. And it really helps the kids to feel included and involved, because there's no like skill really required in terms of becoming part of the eco club or the eco team. And I just love doing it. So I hope to continue doing it for many more years. I am finding this year like a struggle in terms of not being able to do some of the things that I'm passionate about. So I hope that maybe another session we could talk about how people have been overcoming things. So at 5 o'clock right now, I'm running an eco virtual club. And so we meet online, and it's not quite the same. I miss having the kids in person, but we're doing our best to keep talking about environmental issues and making it as fun as possible.
Well, and Rebecca, out that the champions in really the EcoSchools program are the teachers who bring the work into their classrooms as part of their curriculum, the teachers who run the after school or lunchtime eco teams and EcoSchools clubs. Like, hats off to all of you. It's
and that's one of the ways that I found over the years we became Platinum, is because we made everyone aware that it's not something that's added on. It's part of the instructional program. And so it became part of every classroom teacher's instructional, like the books in terms of what we're reading to students and stuff. It just became part of our program.
And that's the ideal, really, is we don't want it to be only a tack on in terms of an after school club, but we want it to be embedded right in the school curriculum. With the climate crisis that we're facing right now, that's really the way that we have to go moving forward. I had a question earlier in the chat from Beth, and Beth was asking, and maybe Lindsay or Pam can answer this one, is there something similar in terms of a certification program for community centers? Is it possible for community centers to have their own eco team youth clubs?
Soon, yes. So part of the regional user experience build out, we're actually partnering with Les Écoles Val Brentland, who run a certification program in Quebec and have for the past 30 years. And they certify daycares and CEGEPs and a variety of different other types of sites that are not necessarily, they're education related, but not necessarily a school building. And so we are piloting what that might look and feel like next year along with them, just because they're bringing decades of experience having, that certification. And then we're we're bringing our sort of school perspective. Our core support will always remain in the K-12 space, but we do want to make the platform at least accessible so that if a school building or an administrative center or a school board office wanted to kind of mirror what was happening in the schools, they could. So to stay tuned and like to be determined. We're definitely working on it, and it's a conversation that's been brought up several times. So we know that there's a gap, but yes, thanks so much for bringing that up.
We'd like to put in a plug too to have faculties of education as part of that certification process, should it expand, because that's a great way to start modeling for new teachers as well, the importance of the EcoSchools program. Another question from Soraya. Being virtual, can we collect our data at the home level since we can't collect data on a larger scale? And Soraya is starting an Eco Club tomorrow after school.
Fantastic. So we actually built a special virtual certification stream. I actually think Pam noted it in the chat there. And if you head to our website and go under what's new, there's a virtual and remote school certification stream with at-home actions. We're recommending that schools that are working, supporting students that are working at home to not use the platform, because we do need to keep our data for school buildings. And we want to keep that data sort of as pristine as possible, but we don't want to exclude those virtual schools or at-home learning opportunities, for getting recognition in the school programs or in the certification program. So there is a special stream for virtual schools. You can go and check it out. It's got a variety of modifications of EcoSchools actions that can be done at home. But we do want to make sure that just sort of bricks and mortar schools are on the platform, just so we can keep that data set intact.
Wonderful, thank you. We've had a couple of suggestions in response to Rebecca's earlier question about how do we do this work online now and during a pandemic.
Sure.
So one suggestion from Dana is to look at citizen science. The City Nature Challenge 2021 is coming up as a recommendation, and Sydney has also suggested our wonderful resources at Green Learning, which has always been a wonderful partner in this work for EcoSchools, but specifically has really kicked into play with all of their online resources that they offer.
For sure. And for schools that are participating in the sort of regular online platform program, we did do a COVID risk assessment of every action that's currently offered in the program and given it a risk assessment of 1 to 3. And modifications and suggested sort of adjustments to those actions are online. So you can also check out those sort of recommended ways to modify actions for hybrid learning or cohort learning. The other thing I should mention is, and we're not sort of like publicly sharing this quite yet, but assessment will look and feel a little bit different this year. So historically, schools that have, whole school engagement score higher than schools that are just working as a classroom as a team. And so we're really thinking carefully about how to adjust that certification criteria to recognize the unique situation we're in right now and make sure that those schools that are really putting in the effort to certify are recognized for those efforts.
And I'd just like to invite Linda Ryan to speak, if that's all right, Linda, if I can put you on the spot. Linda's just put a suggestion about how you're coping with online as part of the EcoSchools process right now. Linda, can you speak to that? You don't have to put your camera on if you don't want to, but it would be great if you can tell us a little bit about your experience.
Sure. Hi, everybody. So we also are mostly online. We do have an in-person cohort of students, but we're not allowed to meet as a club because they're from different cohorts. So we've been meeting virtually as well. And the students have really come forward with a focus on media campaigns because we aren't in the physical building and most of them aren't here. They wanted to try and focus on education. So they've been developing environmentally themed films, children's book, and we have a couple of kids that are really developing our social media platforms. And that's great because it's getting the word out farther afield. We've also had the opportunity to take part in the Mission to Earth Challenge put on by the City of Mississauga to develop sustainability programs under various themes for the whole city. So the kids are actively engaged in that. And at school, we're lucky that we still have our DD cohort of students in class in person. So they are actually the team that has taken on the recycling. So we're still able to achieve some of our actual physical waste minimization goals. So we're trying, and we're lucky that the kids are really engaged. I think they're really looking for connections and they're looking for that opportunity to take action. So we've actually expanded our eco team. I think we have about 40 kids right now that are engaging and involved in different programs.
Oh, Linda, that's a really hopeful note that you finished us on today. Thank you so much. I should point out that Linda is not only an experienced secondary EcoSchools teacher, but she's also the instructor for our additional qualification course at OISE in environmental education for part 1. So she knows of what she speaks, and I can recommend learning with her either this spring or this summer. With that, I think we've answered all the questions in the poll. We're going to bring a formal end to the webinar today, though you're welcome to stay in the room if you want to have some informal talk after we're done. I'd like to thank Lindsay Bunce very much for her wonderful presentation and for all of the exciting work. Please extend our thanks to the EcoSchools Canada team, Lindsay, for this really exciting initiative. And we look forward to tracking the skyrocketing progress that you're all going to make over the coming years. I'd also like to extend a thank you to Pam Miller, to Rebecca, to Catherine for all contributing when called on today. That was really much appreciated. And a special thank you also to Elise Kennedy, who I didn't mention earlier. And Elise is not only a valuable member of our team here at OISE, but she's also the coordinator of the Ecom conference. So I'm going to share my screen one last time. If you aren't familiar with our upcoming events, we've got one more webinar in March where principals are going to be talking about their perspectives on outdoor learning. We don't often get to hear from principals as part of these webinars, so please do join us on March 25th. If you go to the EcoSchools website or to OISE's ESE website, you'll find a link that you can register for that session. And I also want to put in a special plug. Lindsay and I are, along with Haley Higdon, the co-chairs for the National Conference in Environmental Education. Pam has been an integral member of that team as well, as have the TDSB EcoSchools Program. This is actually one way that OISE, EcoSchools Canada, TDSB EcoSchools, the Natural Curiosity Project have all been able to collaborate on the development of this conference. It's a really exciting one. We really encourage you to attend, and if you're a TDSB teacher, there are subsidies available for you to join in this online conference. It's happening right over Earth Day, April 21st to 24th. So the link is up there for you on the screen, and we hope that you'll join us for that really special event. For that reason, there will be no webinars in April. We're going to save it all up and really have fun together at this conference coming up in April. So thank you everybody for attending. Please do complete the feedback poll if you don't mind before you leave the room today.